So the graphs, and then I'm going to flip back to the actual graph. Oh, that's gross. You guys I don't like this stuff. It's like I don't know. We've got lots of legs.
Are you okay? Okay.
Does anyone want to say to him? I think I'm going to kill him. Sorry. He's kind of like a worm with lots of legs.
It's a spider. Yes, it's a
It's not a centipede.
a caterpillar.
Might be like millipede or something.
That's.
Sorry, but
Oh,
for you.
So,
You're the Christmas person.
I worked with this woman once who, she was kind of, I don't know, you probably don't know many, I feel like adults are more like this, where she just always seems to like, she says some things that you don't say to people, like, kind of blunt. And one time I stepped on a centipede in the school, like I worked with her, and I stepped on the centipede to kill it. And she's like, well, you know, centipedes, like all their babies or all their eggs are probably on the bottom of your shoe now. And she wasn't like joking. She was like totally flat serious, like thanks for that fabulous thought. Like so now anytime I kill a bug, I always think of her that like now all the babies are like, I'm carrying them around on my shoe. Like, so yeah. Yeah, so she's a lot of fun to be around. Like some woman I used to work with that was the first maybe first day I met her, and she was like, well, now you have eggs on your shoe. So, and I don't get grossed out by much, but I'm not a big fan of them. So, no, are we good on this? So no questions on, you guys are experts at graphing and parallel perpendicular lines? All right, so what my plan is for today is for us to work on, I told you guys we do a vocab chart, so I have a vocab chart for us. Once we finish the vocab chart, I'll give you guys your homework, but if you guys recall, I told you that we're gonna do that little like algebra skills test. We're gonna do that, and then once you finish the skills test, then you can just start working on homework. So the vocab chart we'll do first, and then we'll have time to work on the test. Again, it's an ungraded test. It's more for me to see what you guys know and what we need to spend time on and what we can kind of skip over or go more quickly through. So we'll do this today. I forgot to put this on a color again, so I apologize. I usually try putting the vocab sheets on a bright color so you can find it more easily. But this sheet are all the vocab words that we want to know for this chapter and some from previous chapters. I threw them in there just because some of the words that come up really frequently, I don't want you guys to forget about. So this chapter kind of felt like two different parts. There was a part where we did all the graphing, and then the alternate interior angles, and those things probably seemed like it was a separate chapter, but it wasn't. Okay, so we have, I have chapter 4 written on the top. It should be chapter 3, sorry. I mean, not that you're going to get confused with the chapter 4 vocabulary because we haven't learned that yet. Bad whistling noise. All right, sorry. again, with our vocab chart, just trying to remind you guys of all the vocab we've learned this year. So nothing today should sound brand new. So if you're like, why is she talking about this again? Part of the biggest issue students have when they take geometry tests is they don't remember the important like vocab when I bring something up. So if I say, how do we know these angles are congruent? You have to know the word corresponding that goes with that. So, so the first one we'll talk about is parallel lines. So the picture of that. Remember, we have this little like arrow or something that shows that those lines are parallel. A would be parallel to B, so we can use that little parallel symbol. And we also learned that the slopes are the same. When you see parallel lines or you hear about parallel lines, you should remember that the slopes are the same and those lines should never touch. So then perpendicular. So remember, we use that little upside down T to show perpendicular. And there has to be a right angle, bless you. Like cross at a right angle. And these for the slopes, this is where we have opposite reciprocal slopes. So when you see that word perpendicular and they're talking about slopes or equations, the slopes are opposite reciprocal. Opposite reciprocal. And if you always forget what reciprocal means, I figured I'd just write it like normal people words. We won't deal with parallel planes very often, but just to kind of bring that up, parallel planes, remember, are planes that would never touch, like the front wall and the back wall of the classroom, or the ceiling and the floor. Actually, this ceiling is not parallel because it has that slope to it. Eventually, this plane would run into the other one if it extended out. No, it goes uphill there. So the front wall and the back wall, I guess, is a better example of that. So basically, in this case, okay, so from here, we're going to get into all our different types of angles. Now remember that you can have corresponding angles and not have parallel lines. However, once we add the parallel lines, then we have congruent angles that show up. You just want to forget about the fact that, so corresponding angles in general, I'll show you guys one that's not parallel. So like 1 and 3 would be corresponding, but they're not necessarily equal here. They don't have to be equal, and they're in the same, is that right? Yeah, the same position. Upper on the left side with the transversal, and then up from the line it crosses. However, once we have parallel lines, a whole lot more interesting things happen with these corresponding angles. So if these lines are parallel, now well, I'm going to use different angles, sorry. I'm going to call it something different, just so we don't get confused. So 2 and 4 would be equal in this case. So 2 would equal 4 if those lines are parallel. If we don't have parallel lines, we don't have any equal angles that we know other than like vertical angles. So corresponding angles are the ones that are in the same position. So you guys remember if I said like it's in the upper left corner of the intersection. That's the corresponding angle. So the next one is alternate interior angles. And I'll do the same thing if they're parallel. So alternate interior angles. So on the interior of the space, there are alternate sides of the transversal. So let's call it 1 and 5 here. 1 and 5 would be equal in this case, or also the ones right next to those. Seems like, I feel like this seems like a long time ago that we learned this, so it's like, might be a little bit rusty there. Alternate exterior angles. I should probably start drawing these differently, but so alternate exterior angles, so like 2 and 3 here. So alternate sides of the transversal, but on the exterior of the 2 parallel lines. Then our last one here, consecutive interior angles. You guys remember what's true of those? They add up to 180. They're the only ones that aren't equal. So 4 plus 5 would equal 180. So consecutive interior angles. All right. So when you're ready to flip the page here, so any of these vocab words you should be familiar with and be comfortable with using. So if I asked you how you knew something was equal, you would be able to say one of these vocab words. I can't remember. I don't think I did a word bank on this chapter, but I can check and see or how much you need the vocab to like just rattle off. But now I did want to, even though these are old vocab words, vertical angles and linear pair, I wanted to throw these in here because they do show up with our alternate interior angles and corresponding angles quite a bit. And I didn't want you to forget about them. So remember, vertical angles show up in these intersections, so when I'm talking about all these alternate interior angles, the vertical angles can be really helpful because, oops, sorry. If I have, again, parallel lines, well, those don't look very parallel. Remember that we have all these vertical angles in this drawing. So like in this case, 4 and 5 would be equal, and that might help us to be able to figure out something else. Now you don't need the parallel lines, so they don't need to necessarily be equal. 4 and 5 would always be equal. Anytime you have vertical angles, you can know that those two are the same. And I just don't want you to forget about those because that's super helpful and it gives us a lot of information about it. Same thing for a linear pair. So a linear pair can be really helpful because it will tell us the one right next to that other angle. So again, if I have my drawing here, the fact that I have parallel lines is even necessary. If I have 1 and 2 here, those would be a linear pair. They add to 180. So remembering that that linear pair exists, and you don't forget about that as well. So that can be a really helpful tool as you're solving for a particular angle. All right, the next one is skew. This doesn't come up a ton, partly because it's hard to draw, because it's three-dimensional. You can't draw it like on flat paper unless you kind of draw a three-dimensional figure. So skew are lines that aren't parallel. Well, they don't ever touch, but they're not in the same plane. Parallel lines have to be in the same plane. So they don't intersect, but they're not in the same plane. And they're lines, so that's important. It's not points that are skewed. If I have my little cube here, skew lines. So the front bottom of that cube or square or little Kleenex box there, and then the back corner that's going up and down. So those are not coplanar. And they're also, they'll never intersect. So we wouldn't consider those like lines parallel because in order to be parallel, they have to be coplanar. If I wrote anything else about that. There might be like one question on that, like just a concept that shows up in this chapter. The last two are formulas you guys are going to want to know. So that's the slope formula and then also slope-intercept form. I don't know what happened. Slope-intercept form there. So the slope formula is how you find the slope using 2 points. Or you can do rise over run. Then also remembering that you can have 0 slope or an undefined slope. So those are formulas you guys are going to want to know, concepts you're going to want to know. And then finally, we have slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b, where b is where we begin on the y-axis. And then m is how we move using the slope. Don't forget if I have like y equals 5, that's going to be a horizontal line at 5, or x equals -2. I'll show you guys those two. So y equals 5 would be a flat line at 5, or x is -2 would be a vertical line at -2. I don't know if that's obvious there. So remembering the difference between that vertical and horizontal line. Right, so I think that's essentially it for vocab. So this would be a great sheet to study over the next couple of days. A lot of times students say, I don't know how to study for math. Just like you study for Spanish, like this is a foreign language, you'd want to study these vocab words. I'd like to write down what our homework assignment will be right away. And then I think actually it might be good for us to, we can swing outside for a minute and then we'll come back and then do that algebra assessment. You want to write it down. So this is the homework for tomorrow. We'll get another review assignment tomorrow then. And I don't believe you need any graph paper. No, you don't want to forget how to graph, but I don't think it makes you graph. Do you guys want to go outside quick? For a little bit.